Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here today to talk to you about a project we started 2 years ago. This is a project using about to create a master data management solution with WSO2 product. Before we started, just a brief introduction about our company. We are an Italian ICT provider. We have many services. We provide ICT services, cloud services, CRM, big data, and advanced analytics. We operate in many markets around the world. We have many employees and offices in Italy, mainly in Italy, but also in Brazil, China, and Tunisia. So, may I have the slides also here? Thanks. The customer involved in this project is the Italian Ministry of the Economy. The project started in mid-2012, and the ministry asked us to redefine and organize its own data to make the data of millions of public administration Italian employees unique, certified, and serve those data easily to external systems. We need to integrate those data we need to integrate data from authorized external third parties also, and offer a lean approach to interface definition and implementation. We need to facilitate the integration of two main IT systems of the ministry, in particular systems that manage personal data and economic data of the employees, and promote the evolution to a single point of management of all this stuff. The solution was to start a project called Anagrafica Unica. It's Italian. In English, it means something like unique repository of personal data. We identified master data within. We can do it. No. No. Yes. We can identify master data within systems of the ministry and redundant repository, so we can exclude that. We scouted for authoritative sources of each dataset, and we defined the very first external system to be integrated, so we can have a minimum dataset to work with. We designed new management processes for the dataset and made agreements with the external data owner to establish new interfaces, exchange interfaces. And we defined a migration workflow for existing data, of course. And finally, we designed and proposed an ad hoc MDM solution based on WSO2 products. All these activities are related to MDM project. We talk about only the last one. This is a reference architecture of a classical MDM solution. Here you can see interface services component. It's the component responsible to talk with the external world. Sometimes consumer can talk directly to the interface services. Sometimes they need, like in our case, a specific plugin to talk with the interface services because there are many legacy systems in the ministry, so that is needed. We have lifecycle services that is the only component that can access the repository layer and manage all the lifecycle of the services. We have the components, the events component that manage all the events happening inside the system and choose the right action to handle all what's next. We have the security component. Of course, services are not available for all users, and some data must be viewed, some not. And we have data quality component because data needs to be validated, certified, so we need some software that can check the data above a specific rule. And we have the repository layer Usually it is divided into four databases, master data, metadata, historical data, and reference data. Master data is obviously the database that holds the golden record, so the information, the business of the ministry is related on. We have historical data that are essentially a versioning of all the master data, where we can retrieve what's happened in the past and who did an operation and what was the old values. We have reference data. Usually we store there almost static lists, like list of cities or regions or type of account and so on. And we have metadata. We use that database to match many structures of database. When you need to integrate many databases, usually they hold the same information but in a different structure. So we need to understand that case, and that information is stored in the metadata. So we started choosing the right software to implement this reference architecture. Obviously, we need to match the requirements of the client. We searched for some key features like interoperability with existing IT components, high modularity. We searched for software that can be optimized for performance and that was open source. We made a comparison. We created documents that compare some pre-built MDM solution like Talent MDM or Informatic MDM and the WSO2 and as you may guess, because we are here, the final decision was to use WSO products for the entire MDM solution paired with Oracle DB for the repository layer. This is the placement of the components, WSO2 products inside the reference architecture. With almost perfect time, the project started in April of 2012, and in March of 2012, the good solution architect from WSO2, Asana Abezinge, I hope I pronounced it well, wrote a very good article titled Lean Approach to MDM Using WSO2 Middleware Platform. So we used that article as inspiration to place to place that components. So you can see the interface services, of course, is made with the enterprise service bus. The lifecycle services is created with data service server. You saw before a presentation about the power of the data service server. We have data quality in enterprise service server also, identity server, Message broker is the component that handle all the events. And for governance and stewardship, we created a custom application and used the governance registry. All is monitored by the business activity monitor, and the repository layer is, of course, Oracle. The flows inside this architecture are many. We can see here a typical flow where we receive some write operation from the outside. In this case, it's a user portal, a very huge user portal. The ministry has more than 2 million of users. So we receive that user has self-service. They can change their own data. They can ask for insurance or other services the ministry offer. So the first level is the ESB. The ESB offer interfaces and orchestrate and composes services created over the DSS. Before of calling the DSS, there is a validation step. Validation steps are created for with internal services and external services also. Here you can see two examples. We check policy, permission policy with the identity server, so we can understand if the user can access that service and what are the information that the service needs to provide in return, because we can filter data from using the same using the same service. The same service can provide different data based on the user. We have also validation with external systems. Here you can see the Italian Revenue Agency. The Italian Revenue Agency that provides a tax ID for all Italian people, and to people that are not Italian but need to pay tax in Italy. For historical reason, this ID used by many Italian ICT provider, but it's not a unique ID. It can be calculated by name, surname, birthplace, and birthday of the person. So we need to be sure that that ID is correct. It's valid. It's still valid because it can change and so on. So that is a good place to put a control like this, like that. Then we arrive to the DSS layer. DSS offer in our case many CRUD, create, read, update, delete services, and they are composed by DSB. The DSS is the only component allowed to access the repository, the master data. Once the master data are modified, we have a mechanism. We need to implement a mechanism to be aware of that modification. So Oracle offers a mechanism called advanced queuing, and via Extremes API, we are able to create Java and PL/SQL procedure that can do two different things. One thing is create historical data. So we unwrap essentially the transaction log, extrapolate interesting data and store that data inside the history. And then we pass those data to message broker for successful the propagation to external systems. Here you can see, but the message broker don't talk directly to external system, but it passes through the ESB component in any case. The governance registry is used to store all the configurations of the components. So USDL, XSD, proxy definition, data services definitions are all gathered inside the governance registry. We have a console to manage that component, and we have the business activity monitor, of course, that can monitor essentially only services in our case, and so it monitor ESB and DSS. We added a custom mechanism to gather statistics and to show real-time performance statistics and to generate reports. Okay, so move on event handling and data propagation. We used, because we talk of a project of 2 years old, we used the framework, the Carbon Framework 3.2.3. So many things. Okay. So something can now can be done without this escamotage we used. In this case, we need to propagate the event from the message broker to external system. We used a publish and subscribe model, a classical model to use when you want to sync data in near real-time manner. But in some cases, we need to schedule tasks because we have strange customers and they want data only in a specific window of time, or because they need to do heavy calculations, so they close the system they close the system, and we need to delay the propagation of the events. So we created a custom component we call center proxies inside the ESB. They use the scheduled tasks from the ESB. Scheduled task is a feature of the ESB. It can call operation in a scheduled manner. The idea is to use the same, to share the same sequence of the classical real-time proxy, but with calling that component in a scheduled manner. Okay. Data validation and cleansing, because this is a system that needs to be sure that data are valid, we implemented an online data validation through schema, obviously, XSD. So we are almost sure that when you pass from by the interface layer, you can't write wrong thing inside the repositories. But the world is not always so easy, so it can happen that operators may makes a manual modification, or we can have a bulk insert into the master data. Usually they should pass through interface services, but sometimes the client don't want to, to do that. So we need to implement on-demand cleansing through scheduled procedure. So it's almost the same thing we saw before. There are scheduled batches that call some proxies inside the ESB, that call DSS, that call usually PL-SQL procedure, that understand if there is some error inside the data. It can be a syntax error like a comma in the surname, or a logical duplicate, and so on. In this case, because the customer don't want an automatic cleansing, so a report is generated. For the service monitoring, we use the UI of the business activity monitor. It's really easy to use, because in our case, the only requirements is to install a specific bundle inside each component to be able to send data of the service, and so we can have statistics and real-time performance for services. But we need to have a UI also for our custom procedure. So we created another console using where you can see the propagation of data from the inside to the outside world, and in specific the extremes situation, because it can be not always in a correct state. From this console, the administration can choose to retry the propagation of data. All these things are made with essentially configuring the products. Many aspects of WSO2 products can be simply configured from the web UI, or as we did some times after we use the web UI, you can use the Developer Studio for all WSO2 components. It's really useful and easy to use. You can put there and design all kind of components, from proxies to repository components to data service server services. And we realized with that tool also custom mediators. In particular, we needed to create a crypto mediator to crypt-encrypt some messages and verify some signed document. It's really useful for versioning, because when you work with many developers, you need to understand what is happening, so the web UI is not easy to use in that case, and for collaboration. We created custom Java procedure for versioning historical data and publishing of events. We so that in the Oracle layer, and the custom and third-party tool to migrate bulk data. In particular, we use the Power Center ETL and some Java procedure. Deployment. All these, the use of WSO2 Developer Studio is useful also because when you need to have a coherent situation spread around many systems, you can rely on Carbon apps. When you create a Carbon apps, you essentially create a single file, a zip file, that consists of all the components that need to spread all over the system. When you deploy this file, the server knows what's the components you need to take, only is its component, and so it installs that components only. This is useful because once you have a system like this, you can integrate it with an application lifecycle management solution already present in the customer environment, like we did. In particular, the ministry have Harvest Configuration Manager by CA, and as a specific workflow to deploy from staging to production and so on. It was easy to, it can be done to create, for example, we create a procedure that a console that with a single click, the customer can pass from staging to production. It essentially run a script that run Maven. Maven create the build, create the Carbon app, deploy it on every server, then the server are restarted in a specific order. We can do this because there are other systems to deploy Carbon apps, but we did this because our system is not 24 hours live. So we can schedule nighttime release for without a problem. Obviously, for bug fixing, critical bug fixing, we can act in the live production environment. This is the current production environment, almost logical / hardware view. You can see balancer. To the right, you can see the main flow. For the main flow, we used 4 nodes. As you can see, because we want performance. For the other, we need only, essentially only high availability. So 2 nodes is enough. For the administrator, we reserved a preferred path to access the governance registry, and all the management all the management can be done by the administration via preferred path. It can manage all the systems through the configuration placed inside the governance registry. It can see statistics. It can see the performance of the services, and paired with a WebLogic application server where are deployed our custom application, it can do the other things we already said. Because we obviously work with stateless services, load balancer are not does not use sticky session, and a suggestion I can give to you is to, when you use cluster for WSO products, I don't know the new product, but our the framework 3 do this. You can choose to separate local configuration, local registry, config registry, and governance registry. Every WSO2 product has these 3 registries. When you use a cluster, you need to store data in the local registry. There are instance data. In the config registry, there are cluster-aware data, and the governance registry, there is diciamo, architectural data. We did this with Atom via HTTPS. It seems a good choice at the beginning, but with the increasing of services, we here have many services, performance goes down really fast. So we need to switch to JDBC option. So if you need to do this do it with JDBC. And what next? Within this year, we are going to include into Anagrafica Unica all the employees of the Italian public administration sector. The remaining are 1.2 million and over a grand total of 3.5 million. And to serve, we will serve data within this year to more external systems, in particular the Ministry of Healthcare, and more has to come soon. So, if you have any questions. I see a hand waving. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Basically, you say you told us that you have compared the WSO2 solution with other solution.
Yes.
And for instance, I guess talent, MDM, or
yes.
things like this. Why did you choose WSO2 products?
Well, we choose that because first of all, flexibility. Our customer is pay great attention over the avoid lock-in with vendor. So when the ministry needs to choose a software, you need to be sure that can change the provider like us, and don't we easily. So a custom, for example, a pre-built MDM solution was more difficult to change the provider. So WSO2 is a better choice in that case. Also, a good feature of WSO2 products is that it can fit only requirements, because you are able to enable and install only bundles that you needed. So other products have, of course, many other features that WSO2 does not have, because WSO2 is based on services, events, and so on. So master data management is not the core business of WSO2, but it can be created with this product. The idea of create this kind of architecture it's good because you can change the provider essentially, and because you can also activate only what you need to do. Also, it's open source, so you can modify behaviors that you don't like, or you can extend behaviors like we did with, for example, with customer with the crypto mediator, and that was the reason why I remember now. Oh, non vedo niente. Ah, okay.
In your architecture diagram, you had mentioned the DSS service, the data service, right? Just curious how you were able to handle the performance, given that, I mean, first question was more around, how much volume you're looking at. And as the data was flowing into ESB, you had this additional data service component, which probably would have its own latency and some kind of a blocking I/O. So how did you handle the flow part? Because you were trying to access the database while the data is flowing into ESB, right?
I think I didn't get your question.
Okay.
So about performance, about the DSS?
Right. So I think more question was, as part of your mediation, you had the DSS, right? Or you didn't?
Yes, so we sorry,
Right.
I can't understand.
So, I mean, I think I was just kind of questioning, like, how did you address the performance part of it as the data was streaming in?
The performance, we used essentially to improve DSS performance, we did nothing aside by use more server. To monitor the performance, we use the business activity monitor. There is not a case where we need to improve more for now. So I don't know if I answered your question. Sorry, maybe we can talk later because I really don't hear you.
A question about your BAM usage. Did you use only toolboxes that were existing, or did you make some specific toolboxes?
Sorry,
for the business activity monitoring? Did you use existing toolbox, or did you create some specific toolbox for the metric, for the monitoring?
The monitoring, we used business activity monitor to gather data from services, but only from services, because WSO2 components can install a bundle that enable the gathering of statistics and send that statistics to the server via polling. So that data, we can view that statistic and that performance directly inside the business activity monitor without do anything. For our custom procedures, we create a custom web UI to see statistics, not performance. So we, for example, in the Extremes API or the database layer, we don't know directly performance of that part. We know performance of the overall system. So if some strange happen, we will scout where the problem is, and maybe it can be on Oracle, but we don't have this specific view of performance of all the components, but also only for those created by us and services of the ESB and DSS. I hope I answered. Okay. Thank you.